target big organizations and enterprises, trying to get into those institutions and basically do bad things. And we're going to look at some specific examples as we go through this of attacks that have already occurred and the various level of sophistication that's already getting employed. So let's start with the Elvadis case. I don't know how many people are familiar with this gentleman. He was from Lithuania, and he engineered an attack where he ultimately managed to steal over $120 million. And this wasn't from naive tech novices. This was from Facebook and Google. That was his take just from those two organizations. And it was a very clever attack in some sense. What he did was he set up a company which had a very similar name to a company in Taiwan. And then what he did was he basically submitted fake invoices of the exact kind of equipment that he suspected Facebook and Google would be likely to be buying from this company in Taiwan. And the only real difference is the bank account number that the money was getting sent to. And as a net result, over a period of about 5 years, he drained $120 million out of both companies before the fraud was discovered. So these are big tech giants. They're sophisticated. They know about all the cyber attacks and that kind of stuff. So if they can get taken for that kind of money, every enterprise, every organization has some level of vulnerability that they should be aware of. So what are going to be the type of AI enhanced attacks that we're going to see? Well, I think it's going to start with already existing attacks that are out there. So you're probably very familiar with the phishing messages that come through, and then the more sophisticated attacks moving up the chain. Oh, go ahead.
Salt.
Oh, sorry. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can. Apologies, that was an error on my part.
Oh, okay, no problems. So what we're going to see, I think, is AI enhancing already existing attacks to begin with. So things like phishing messages, spear phishing attacks, which are a more sophisticated form where you're actually targeting specific individuals inside organizations, and then finally whaling attacks, which are where you're going after really big name people that have a high public profile. And we can already see with the phishing messages coming through that they're much higher quality than what they were 2 or 3 years ago. You used to get messages with rather poor grammar, or you might have got misspellings, or the English just sounded kind of odd. And all of that now can be cleaned up easily by criminals with just an anonymous email address and going on to something like ChatGPT. And it can also create nice HTML profiles that mimic things like Google or Facebook or any other organization that they want to now. So it makes the emails look a lot more legitimate. So how are they going to enhance their existing attacks? Well, as I just mentioned, they are already using things like ChatGPT to make the English sound better. But other things they're going to do is also start creating much more realistic images, audio, video, and digital documents, because AI allows you to do that. So in this picture here, you can see President Obama greeting our mascot, who is Scotty, which is our cute little dog, your loyal AI pal. But of course, this picture is not real. President Obama has never met Scotty, partly because Scotty is entirely fictional. Scotty is created entirely by AI. And so these kind of images are going to get much more sophisticated, much more believable as time goes forward. And you need to be aware of this kind of technology. We're going to look at some examples in audio as well as images as you go through this document, but video is just around the corner as well. So as I mentioned, the first thing we're already seeing is the phishing messages are getting much better. They sound much more natural. They seem much more believable. But spear phishing is also going to now become a much better target for cyber criminals. And this has actually happened, unfortunately, to us. We had a new employee who joined the company. And what do people do when they get a new job? Well, they get excited about it. He posted on LinkedIn, hey, I was joining Smarter. And it's a great occasion. But the cyber criminals are looking for that kind of stuff now on LinkedIn, and when they see it with their AI bots, they then try to figure out who is the likely boss of this person, or maybe the boss's boss. And then they targeted him with these messages saying that I desperately needed to get some gift cards for a meeting that I was in. And unfortunately, he got taken for a couple £100 because he wanted to look good in front of his boss. And so he bought these gift cards and sent the numbers. But of course, they weren't to me. They were to the person that was trying to actually get the money out of him. And how is spear phishing going to happen? Well, internally, we already have tools that Smarter that allow us to build up a large amount of information and data on potential customers we would like to sell to. But criminals also have access to those same tools, and they're going out to places like the dark web, to social media, to government websites, and to emails. And with AI, you can now build up this graph of knowledge about individuals. This would have been impossible to do 4 or 5 years ago. It had been way too labor intensive. But with these tools, you can now do it for significantly less money. So sophisticated criminal organizations are now going to start using these tools to build up these much more comprehensive profiles about potential victims. And then when they do, they'll send targeted messages to them, and they'll do exactly what they try to do to my poor employee, which is to trick them into doing something that's bad either for them or bad for the company. But then you move on to things like the whaling attacks, and whaling attacks are going to open up a whole new front of stuff that you need to do and deal with. Because of that with whaling attacks, you're looking at people that have very high profiles. So they're known, and there's a lot of information out there about them. They've probably done lots of interviews, they've spoken at conferences, they've written articles and white papers and books and all this kind of information that's out there that we can now use AI to clone. And it's moving forward very quickly. I want to start by showing you one example here that was created using some older technology, about a year old or so, this first example we're going to see. And then we're going to look at something that is created with some much newer technology. And you can see the difference in quality. So hopefully I can get this to play. Oh, excuse me. I think that this is not going to play today. Try it again. See if we can get the better clip to play here. I apologize here. Let me try one more time. Can you still see my screen? Possibly not. Let me reshare. Hang on a second and see if I can get this to play. Microsoft Teams is not happy this morning with me for some reason. Okay, see if we can get this to play now.
Thank you, South Africa, for inviting me back. I wanted to say no, but then my friends at Smarter AI told me I should do this.
Hang on, I think you guys probably can't hear that. Let me just take my microphone off, and I think you'll be able to hear it in a second. Hang on. So that was created with some older technology. And now I want to show you, what just 1 year, less than a year's worth of difference does in terms of the quality that these audio recordings sound like.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the Gauteng provincial government, I I must say it's a pleasure to be here today. Although I must admit I'm not entirely sure how I managed to escape the clutches of my wife, Camilla, long enough to make this trip. Simply smashing job with this tool.
So hopefully you could hear those both fairly clearly. But what you saw with these kind of clips is in that second clip, the intonation, the spacing, the way that whole thing came together was much more believable. It was quite plausible if you weren't prepared for it that this was completely fake video, sorry, fake audio. And to give you some sense of how hard that was to create, that took me around 2 or 3 minutes to put together. It's very simple by now with the latest state-of-the-art tools to be able to create that kind of a convincing audio signature of someone where you get the intonation and the voice and all that kind of thing much more accurately now. And I'm just going to switch back here and reshare my screen so you can see it in full screen. And hopefully that reshares. Apologize for the IT problems we're having this morning. Microsoft is still fighting with me. There we go. I think it's, hopefully you can see the screen again.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Yes, we can.
So what AI is going to do is enable new ways of actually also attacking organizations. So we talked about existing methods that are going to become, I think, a lot more common. So these various phishing attacks, spear phishing, whaling, those kind of attacks are going to become more sophisticated. Is something you're going to need to guard against and know and understand that your organization is going to be threatened by them. But there are going to be new attack surfaces opened up from AI. So the first one is psychological profiling. The next one is much more efficient code writing and vulnerability discovery. And the last one is also reverse engineering of proprietary code. So AI is going to enable all three of these particular attacks to become much more common. I want to focus on the psychological profiling today a little bit to give you some sense of what that attack might look like. So we've already seen a very important attack along those lines against a tool called XZ Utilities. Now, XZ Utilities is not a very well-known tool, but it's used in the open source community, and it's quite fundamental to some important operations in the Linux operating system. And of course, Linux runs a lot of the world's most important servers. So what happened in this particular case is we think a big state actor, we don't know which one, but a big state actor found that this tool was being maintained pretty much by one person. And all of a sudden, these requests started coming in for new features and complaints about the tool, and it wasn't working. And they knew that this person had a history of mental illness, and his name was, by the way, Lassie Collin. And they were piling a lot of pressure. And then this person called Mr. Tan turned up and offered to help and submitted some code. And then after a period of stress and anxiety, and pressure from the community, he allowed another maintainer in to be able to maintain and add stuff automatically to the source code, who was this Mr. Tan. Well, of course, Mr. Tan didn't really exist. He was a state actor, and he immediately put in some malicious code into that particular utility that would have allowed pretty much anyone that knew about its existence and how to exploit it to get into any Linux server on the planet when that update rolled out. Now, fortunately, that was caught by someone that was working on the Postgres database because they noticed some interesting errors and a slight slowdown in performance when they were testing under Linux that wasn't there on the previous testing they'd done. And that unraveled it and exposed the whole scam. And so it never got released out into the wild. But that level of psychological profiling and figuring out who might be vulnerable individuals was something that was pretty much reserved for the big intelligence agencies. But now with AI and all the data leaks that happen, because let's be honest, lots of data goes missing, You can now see cyber criminals starting to troll through people's medical records that have gotten leaked and starting to figure out who might be vulnerable, who can they target, how can they target them, and then use that information to try and bury inside organizations. And this chart shows you on the screen a whole number of different attack surfaces that people are now looking at and trying to understand how AI is going to impact the world of cybersecurity. Okay, so it's pretty scary, all these attacks. You know, what can you do to defend against these AI enhanced attacks? Well, in the financial services industry, you're probably very familiar with the term KYC, or know your customer, but you should also know your suppliers too. And there was a famous exploit that happened about a year ago, and a lot of money and data was lost when a tool called MoveIt was exploited. There was a vulnerability that was discovered in MoveIt, and the criminals got in there, and they stole about $9 billion worth of money, caused a huge amount of damage. Lots of data was also stolen at the same time. And an awful lot of companies that were affected by this had no idea they were even using MoveIt anywhere in their systems, because they weren't themselves using it. It was trusted partners and suppliers were using MoveIt. So just like you need to know your customers if you're in banking, in IT, you now need to know who your suppliers are and what are they using. It's not good enough just to think about what am I using. You need to think about what are they using too. Just this month, MoneyGram was hit. Once again, a lot of people losing money, and it affected a lot of organizations. Now, in such a dynamic and large environment, it's almost impossible at this particular stage to guarantee that you're not going to be attacked one way or another. And so another thing that has definitely come a new focus, especially in the financial sector, is to focus on resilience. So you obviously want to do everything you can to prevent getting attacked and having vulnerabilities in your system, but you have to assume at some point in time someone will find a way in. And so when that happens, you need to be able to recover quickly. And that idea of resilience is now becoming the new kind of watchword in the cybersecurity arena, that how do I recover quickly when something bad happens? And one other thing that you also, I wish I didn't talk about in terms of so much fraud or bad actors, but you need to also be careful of where you're sending your data to. We see a lot of people now coming to work, and they've found ChatGPT and it's really helpful. It really helps get their job done. But there's no formal IT department or oversight of what they're doing. And they're just logging into ChatGPT at their own personal accounts, and they're putting all kinds of corporate data now into ChatGPT. And you really don't know where that data is going. In fact, ChatGPT until March this year was using all of that data for doing training. They're still using lots of information you're putting in for doing training. So when your employees are out there using these tools, you really don't know where your data is going. You don't know what secrets and what information are getting exposed. So organizations should also think about making sure that that information isn't leaking out the door, because once it gets built into a model, cyber criminals can exploit those models and break them, or what we call jailbreak them, and get that information back out, even if it appears to be hidden to normal kind of queries. There are ways of breaking those models and getting the training data back out of them. So one of the things that everyone always says, but it's really critical, is training and awareness. It's really good to focus on this as your primary defense. You want to upgrade your training programs. You want to think about all these areas where cyber attacks can be occurring and make sure that people are aware of them and understand how serious they are and the problems that can happen if they're not vigilant in terms of what might be coming into the enterprise and organization. One area that you can also do more work in, I think, is better AI email screening and text screening and various other messages coming into the organization. This can help employees spot bad emails. And one of the things that system can also do is just kind of encourage employees to stop and think, you know, does this make sense what I'm doing? One of the things that we've set up internally as a tool, I'm going to show you a quick video of here, but it's a demonstration of a tool that you can go to internally if you have a question and just want to kind of get a double check. Does what happened make sense? You know, as I told you, we have this problem with an employee getting attacked. And so now you can say, in this case, it's like, Scotty, do you think my mom sent me this email? So that's what we put in, and Scotty comes back and says, well, I don't have access to emails. Can you show me what the email is? So I copied and pasted in just a work email, and Scotty comes back fairly quickly with his diagnosis. And if you look at the email that I put in, it's got things like, I'm sending you encrypted files, and I've written this in Python and that kind of stuff. And so Scotty quite sensibly decides, in this particular case, it's very unlikely that this email came from my mom. It's talking about very technical stuff. It's got a very formal tone. And, you know, unless my mom happens to be someone that's working in cybersecurity and works a lot of coding, it's a highly unlikely email to be coming from my mom. But these kind of interactive AI systems can allow your employees and everyone in the organization to kind of double check, like, oh, is this good or is this bad? It can help flag and warn people about problems where they don't need to be embarrassed about going and asking a manager or asking someone else. They can just put this in and get straight answers back from the AI system about what risk might be there. Now, this one hasn't even been that heavily tailored for looking at risk, but you know, these kind of systems can be developed to specifically look at particular vulnerabilities and risks and get updated, so that when employees have concerns or questions, they can go in and ask these systems and get 24/7 feedback. The other thing we're going to see, I think, is also enhanced penetration testing with AI. So with AI, we can now generate many more attacks than we could with just sort of the manual coding methods, and the attacks can come in slightly different forms and look at variations and nuances that may not get as well covered with conventional tools. And that would be true not only for your tech stack, which is, of course, very important to check that that is secure, but also for the people. You know, that human intelligence can also go through training with the generative AI systems. And those generative AI systems can give them much harder and more difficult problems to try and figure out, is this real? Is this not real? And that can be really helpful to, once again, just getting people sensitized to what they should be looking for when they're doing their day-to-day work, and whether or not they're exposing themselves or their organization to potential vulnerabilities that shouldn't be happening. And then another thing that I think really needs to be looked at is authentication systems. You know, you've seen the voice cloning, video cloning is coming, signatures are going to be coming, better signature cloning is going to be coming. A lot of public-facing people have two signatures, you know, their public persona signature and their private signature. But even those private signatures these days are easy to hoover up, you know, from court cases, birth certificates, marriage records, divorce papers. You know, a lot of this information is publicly available in a lot of countries. And that information will get hoovered up and people will put it together now with AI. And so that means that the traditional way that we've thought about authenticating people, especially customers coming in to your enterprise, you need to think about, okay, how are you really going to authenticate this person? Is the person they claim to be? And while video is not a problem yet, I think it's fairly easy to see an AI generated video is still fake. I don't think that's going to be true in 2 or 3 years. So you might get onto a video conference with someone you think is your client. It looks like your client. It talks like your client. You know, it acts like your client. But in reality, it's just an AI avatar of someone pretending to be that client. And so how are you going to protect your organization against making bad mistakes when people can do this kind of deep cloning, these deep fakes? And so that authentication process needs to be, I think, rethought, especially in the US, where a lot of organizations are already relying on voice prints to kind of confirm someone is who they say they are. And then it's not just your internal part of the organization you need to be worried about. You also need to worry about all the stakeholders that are involved. It's so yes, you educate your employees, but you also need to talk to your customers and all the other stakeholders about how you're going to protect them and the methods and ways you're going to communicate. For example, my bank will never call me. It's sort of an agreed upon principle. They don't call me. If they need to communicate with me, we have an entirely different method of doing that. And yet I get calls from my bank all the time. But of course, it's not my bank, it's cyber criminals. They want to try getting into your bank account. They're trying to get you to change your password or do various things so they can get in there. So having those clearly defined, well-communicated ways that you're going to interact with all the other stakeholders in the organization really helps to shrink down those attack surfaces that criminals can use to try and hurt people and hurt your organization as well. So you want to think that out in terms of how we're going to restrict the way that people try to get into the organization, and you need to communicate that clearly to everyone that you're going to be working with and anyone that might be affected. And as I said previously, you also want to build resilience in. You have to assume now sort of the worst case scenario, unfortunately, that people will eventually manage to find a way to get in and cause damage. And so when that happens, how do you come back quickly? How do you spread the message and the information that needs to be spread across the entire ecosystem, everyone that might be affected? You need to think through those things. And if you don't, or if you try to cover stuff up, eventually what will happen is people will lose trust in you. And so it's better to be upfront about what's happening and have a clear plan as opposed to just trying to cover it up. And, you know, I just talked about this a little bit before, but that incident response plan is something that you really need to kind of figure out, especially bigger organizations. And it really comes back to recovering quickly and communicating with the stakeholders. You know, what do I need to get out to them? How do I get it out to them? What can I do to tell them how they can protect themselves given what's just happened to the organization? So to kind of recap on this cybercrime of people trying to get in from the outside into the organization, you know, get prepared now. It's really worthwhile to get all your ducks in a row and make sure that you've got a plan in place for trying to prevent people from getting in. And then if people do get in, how are you going to recover from that? You want to consider the new attack surfaces that are getting created by AI, and every enterprise is going to have different vulnerabilities because of the way that they interact with their stakeholders in that enterprise. So you want to think about how could people exploit that and how can we protect against that? And then finally, and very importantly, plan for resiliency. Plan for that horrible day when something goes horribly wrong and someone does get inside the organization. You know, what is your plan for dealing with that when that happens? So now I want to transition and actually look at a slightly different scenario. This is a product that we make called Scotty. It's the data analyst, and I'm going to show you a new variant of it today that we are hoping to release actually in South Africa in 2025. And it's helpful, I think, just to start to see what the data analyst was. And then we'll talk about what we're working on in terms of a new technology to help prevent fraud inside the company. So let me start here with a quick video of this Scotty data analyst for you.
Welcome to the Smarter AI demonstration of the Scotty Data Analyst. We have loaded a database about bicycle sales. Scotty is designed to answer questions and visualize results using natural language queries. Let's ask Scotty, please visualize orders by day in 2023. Scotty analyzes the database, writes the necessary code in Python, constructs a SQL query to extract the sales information, and automatically produces a graph visualizing the results. Scotty doesn't just blindly write code or database queries, it actually looks at the data source and figures out how to construct the exact query needed. The graph Scotty created allows us to see a glance at how orders fluctuated throughout 2023, enabling quick identification of peak periods and potential factors influencing sales volumes. Now let's switch databases and look at answering text-based questions. Scotty can actually hook multiple databases together if needed, providing a unified view across disparate data sources. Let's ask, which branch had the highest revenue in 2023? Scotty creates the SQL query to extract the relevant answer, leveraging its understanding of the data and appropriate fields from the connected databases. In this case, the Paris Central branch had the highest revenue at 2.3 million euros. Switching back to the sales data, we've seen Scotty generate graphs and answer questions. Let's now see how Scotty can run a basic statistical analysis to reveal patterns in the data. Can I see a correlation matrix for the info in the orders table? Using AI to enable natural language data exploration opens up data utilization far beyond what was previously possible. This democratization of data will enable enterprises to become more efficient, gain valuable operational insights, and empower more informed decision-making across the organization. The correlation matrix reveals that footfall was important for boosting sales, while the marketing budget didn't seem to influence sales or footfall significantly. This insight could prompt a review of the marketing department's strategies. With AI tools like Scotty, the ability to visualize, analyze, and derive insights from data is no longer limited to technical roles. It becomes accessible to anyone who needs it. Scotty is brought to you by Smarter AI.
So we're adopting Scotty, and the tentative name of the new product we're calling is Fraud Shield. And the idea is it allows people to monitor what's going on with their procurement data. And it's going to have a standard suite of tests inside it that are all run using AI against your data. But it looks for a number of problems. So the first thing we're looking for is fraud. Has there been fraud going on where either people externally, like the Elvedes case, or internally where people might be siphoning off money from inside the organization? So that's the first thing that it will look at. But also look at some other things that are also important in terms of resilience, which is, are you developing a particular dependence on a key supplier or suppliers? Or have some suppliers been, raising their costs fairly aggressively, and maybe you should be looking for new suppliers? So this is the kind of technology that we're building into Scotty Fraud Shield. And then it will also have that interactive question and answer capability that you just saw in the data analysts, or you saw in the other video we showed where people could ask questions of Scotty. And one of the things that we really focus on is this idea of private and secure AI models. And so these are models that live on site, they live on premise. So once we've created the model for a client, we always give it to the client and make sure that they have access to it, and that they control it, and that data isn't going anywhere. It all stays inside their organization. The model actually now will understand the data you have. So this is some actual real procurement data that we loaded in from a client actually in South Africa. It's around 600,000 transactions of stuff that they had been buying. And when the data gets loaded, Scotty, the first thing Scotty does is actually go through and look at the columns, and it looks at the data, and then it tries to figure out what does each one of these columns mean and do. And you can see here, for example, that it will say, for example, stock type is reasonably clear, but it's the type of stock, either stock or non-stock item. And it goes through and it identifies all of that kind of stuff so that you can now communicate with it in plain English without having to reference the particular fields or stuff that you want. You can now just ask questions in English. So an example of asking a question in English would be, can you do a Bedford analysis on the leading digits of the value column? Now, Bedford analysis is a standard technique people use for looking for fraud. And what you expect to see is a certain distribution in the leading digits of all the numbers. And it's sort of just by nature that the numbers tend to fall into this kind of a pattern where 1 is the most common and 9 is the least common leading digit. So I asked Scotty to go do that. And Scotty came back and produced this really nice graph of the digits. And so one of the things you'll notice on the graph is we actually have some leading digits of 0, which you don't expect in a Bedford analysis. And that turns out there were some nulled out transactions that just had 0 value in them, and that was in the data set. But overall, you can see that the data follows the Bedford distribution pretty closely. You see this 1 at the top decaying down to 9 at the bottom, and we actually follow that pattern pretty well. But is there anything there to worry about? It looks okay. How do I know it's okay? Well, I asked Scotty the question, is this variance in distribution statistically significant? And Scotty went and ran another test and said, to determine if the variance of the distribution is statistically significant, we'll perform a chi-squared test. And so it looked at a chi-squared test between the actual values we got back for the distribution and what the theoretical values are. And lo and behold, the p-value was greater than 0.05. So that means there's nothing suspicious that this particular test turned up. But this product will have a whole bunch of tests like this in it that are designed to look for all kinds of common fraud cases and then generate a report for the controller or for the CFO. So you can then go look at this report and decide if there is anything there important that you should be looking at in more detail. Anyway, I want to thank you for attending today. I've put my contact information up, so feel free to scan it and or reach out to me on LinkedIn or to email me. I really appreciate having the chance to talk to everyone today, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have at this particular point in time.
Yeah, thank you, Oliver, for the presentation. Colleagues, any questions? Okay, Rajeki, you can come in. I saw a hand from Mr. Mahanyeli.
To the contrary, it's just saying I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Do any of you actually deal with things like cybercrime or fraud or that kind of stuff? I mean, does anyone there deal with that? Are there any concerns you see here that would be relevant to you, or stuff you would suggest that we consider putting into, say, the Fraud Shield product? Everyone's ready to go to lunch, I think, by the looks of it. We got a question there.
Okay.
Hi, good morning, colleagues. Are we continuously going to have the sessions, or was this session just for was it a once-off session?
No, we're going to continuously have this kind of sessions, Tavis.
So is it some type of a forum where we're going to be discussing different topics on different sessions?
Yes, of course.
Okay. No, thank you for that. I think maybe just Oliver to touch on a couple of things that from our side we very careful of. It's I think when I was joining the session, I saw one of the read.ai application that from our side we are not allowing from our side because we don't know where it stores the data. I think it's one of the issues that we had previously from our side, but we had managed to block it from our side, and to also inform everyone at GPG to say that you do not have to have this application installed. We have blocked it. All those that have had it, they need to uninstall it, because the main problem is we don't know where the data is stored, and the service provider for that, it might be joining one of the most important meetings where they are discussing the most important information, and those that have activated it, because we don't know where it is storing the information. That is one of the concerns that we had, and we had to act on it. I think when we are talking about AI, we're talking about quite a lot of applications that are going to be introduced into our environment, and we just need to be careful on how we utilize them, and also the security part that comes with those applications. If they are not Microsoft licensed, because we are Microsoft licensed, then we are not supposed to have that at all. And also on our policies, we do emphasize that all the third-party applications that are not authorized by the department are not allowed to be within our environment. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really valid point. I mean, there's a lot of people seem to have sort of lost sense of the fact there's some real dangers about sending your data out to these tools because you don't know where it's going to go. And as I mentioned, we specialize in just doing the on-site, on-prem versions of AI. So all the data stays on-site. We're working right now, for example, with a US defense contractor. And even for training the models, everything's done on site. None of the data ever leaves the building, and all the AI models stay on site. And so one of the things that we can do is actually build up these models now that work really well and host them on reasonably priced servers where clients can then just use them and know they've got full control of their data sovereignty. And so I think you're quite correct to be concerned. I mean, and even with Microsoft, if you're using the Microsoft AI tools, Microsoft's had a number of leaks, unfortunately. A lot of data has gone missing. And Microsoft kind of gets a pass for it because of the fact that it is a big organization and it is sophisticated, but it's not invulnerable to leaks. And so you still want to think about that, that data could be going out and where could it go if it gets into bad actors' hands.
Yes, thank you for that.
Go ahead. We got another question there?
Yeah, I see. Kaya sent. Kaya, you can come in.
No, thank you very much. No, I just wanted to pick up on what Tabiso just said now, in relation to the other AI apps that are there. So he says that some of them that can be utilized, if I heard you correctly, Tabiso, you're saying some of them that can be utilized must be Microsoft licensed. But my question is there, some of the AI tools that are used, some of them can be found on Microsoft Teams. So I don't know how those applications that can be found there are aiding in this whole issue that we are referring to.
Hi, Kaya. I think my main concern is when it comes to this AI application is if it's not licensed from our side, we are unable to push any security patches or measures on those applications. Only if they are licensed from our side, we can be able to then fully manage and maintain those applications so that we don't have any vulnerabilities from our side. That is the main concern. So if we then have applications like your read.ai that is not licensed from our side and it's not allowed, you are introducing an alien application on our site that we are unable to push any security patches on. And when it comes to managing the vulnerabilities that comes with those applications, it becomes a very tedious exercise because we are not licensed to push any security patches on those applications.
All right, no, I get that, but what I'm trying to establish is that how would we know which ones are licensed by the department? How would we know that this AI tool is licensed by the department?
From my understanding, I stand to be corrected. We don't have any AI active tool that we are using at the current moment, unless if we are also expanding on the AI, we are talking about your Teams and your other applications that are Microsoft licensed. That that are Microsoft licensed, but anything that summarizes the minutes for us from our side is not licensed. I think also the organization is looking into the Copilot features that will also maybe can come to assist with that, but it's still an ongoing discussion on that part. But I think from our side, we should be in a position to get all the applications that are licensed that the organizations can be able to use. From our side, maybe a list can be shared with everyone with the help of maybe the release team or other colleagues that are responsible for those applications.
Other questions that people have right now?
I know this is if I'm asking an internal question. Hello, everybody. I'm Neil. So I work with Oliver. with regard to data analysts and some of the other stuff we're doing and not wanting to breach NDAs and all that sort of thing, can you highlight on how Scotty works with a lot of the legacy architecture within organisations like banks? Because some of them are even using old IBM machines, aren't they, in COBOL and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we specialize in these private models that get hosted by the client, and Scotty can hook together multiple systems. So you can kind of think of a Scotty on top of each system that is actually interacting with that system, and then you can even have a Scotty on top of the Scotties to coordinate all the activity that's going on. So it's really great if you've got a legacy database or something like that where the developers might have left or it's gone through a lot of revisions, and you can bring in Scotty and actually get that database to be understood by the AI agent and document your database. And then once it's documented that database, then you can actually then query it and get more information out of it. And you can do all that without any concern of outside tools or data going out of house, because we can run all of that AI system all on your local servers. And if you've got your own private cloud, you can put it in your private cloud. So we can keep everything safe and secure when people are actually doing this particular kind of AI work. So effectively, we bring AI inside the organization, and then it never communicates to the outside world, unless, of course, you want it to. But typically, it just stays all inside your organization and keeps all the data there. All right, great. Well, I really appreciate the chance to talk with everyone today. I don't know if there's anything you want to do, Diapo, to finish up here, or?
No, Oliver, in the absence of further questions, I think, colleagues, thank you very much for attending the session. And yeah, I don't see any hands. So in the absence of hands, we can just adjourn this meeting.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed talking to you today, and hopefully it was useful, the information that I gave you.
Thank you. Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.